Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Wildlife podcast. I am your host, Courtney, and Happy New Year! This is the first episode of 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in and for taking your time to listen to the podcast. I am truly forever thankful for every single one of you. We are kicking off the new year with a very fun episode. Things are kind of switching up here on the podcast. Last year we discussed Australian animals, and we still are on the podcast, but I have had the great pleasure of traveling around the world, and I've encountered so many different, wild, bizarre, unique animals along the way, especially in Europe. So I would love to talk and discuss these animals with you guys and hopefully bring a little bit of knowledge to that so you guys can learn a thing or two about different animals around the world, not just our fantastic Australian wildlife. And we are bringing back a little game we played last year that you guys absolutely loved, which makes me so happy. It was our rating some of our deadliest Australian wildlife, and you guys loved it. So we are bringing back part 2 for that, not in this episode. This episode, we are actually discussing an animal that is native to Africa, but there are some populations that do exist right here in Australia. So let's get straight into this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy 2025. This is our conversation on the big, powerful, beautiful ostrich. Our ostrich is a truly remarkable bird, and they are really misunderstood as well. They have such powerful legs and they can run at great speeds. These birds are some of our largest by size and by weight. So let's get into it. Why are ostriches so magnificent? Where do they live? What's their role in the ecosystem? And how can we protect them, even being all the way here in Australia, if you're in the US, UK, India, Asia? How can we protect them when they live in Africa? Let's get into it. So there are roughly 10,000 different species of bird that exists today on Earth, which is a tremendous number, massive. It's so hard to even comprehend. 10,000 different species of bird. And the ostrich is actually the largest by size and by weight. And that is, again, in itself remarkable. You know, we have some of the smallest bird species like our hummingbird, all the way to our great emus and cassowaries, and of course the ostrich. Our ostrich can weigh over 150 kilograms and be roughly over 2 meters tall. That is insane. I think the largest ever was like 2.9 meters, which, how do we even start to comprehend that size, that sheer size? And seeing them in the wild, if you have had the opportunity of seeing those few that live here in Australia, down in South Australia, or if you have been on safari or you've been roaming around an African country and you've seen the ostrich, their sheer size, in words that I can only think of, is scary. They are so powerful. They can actually injure or kill a lion or one of their predators with a single kick. So you don't want to be getting close to these animals. They are so strong and powerful. They are flightless. Of course, they are our largest flightless bird in the world. And their wingspan alone can be up to 2 meters. Again, remarkable. But if our ostriches don't fly, why do they have these wings? What are they used for? So the wings of an ostrich is actually used for many, many different things. They are very fast. They can run up to 70 kilometers per hour. So they need that capability to be able to steer and maneuver whilst they are running at such great speeds to outrun and outmaneuver the predators. And they are preyed upon by jackals and lions and hyenas. So they can use these massive 2-meter long wings, like their wingspan from one tip of their wing to the other on the other side to maneuver. They can also use their wings to defend themselves. They can make themselves look bigger when necessary, whether to scare off predators or to use them in mating, to attract a female, to look like the bigger male. They kind of puff themselves up and use that wingspan to make themselves look larger. So as I mentioned, they are hunted by our large cats, like our lions. They are also hunted by jackals. And these animals primarily live in Africa. So you will find our ostriches in our African countries. And we have 2 different species of ostrich. We have our common ostrich and our Somali ostrich. Our large, beautiful common ostrich is found in the southern and eastern parts of Africa. So this is where you may find our common ostrich in the Sahara Desert. Whereas with our Somali ostrich, of course, you'll find them in Somalia. You'll also find them in Kenya and Ethiopia as well. So our ostriches are native to Africa. But as I mentioned, you can actually find a handful here in South Australia. Now, in the 1800s, the 1890s, and also the 70s, the 1970s, ostriches were farmed here in Australia for their feathers and for their meat. Unfortunately, this just didn't work and the whole farming system failed. So a lot of ostriches were released into the wild. They still live there today, but they don't thrive in our Australian deserts. They're just not made for it. Compared to in Africa, where our ostriches are well suited for their desert and for the environment and the ecosystem, here in Australia, they play a little bit of a different role. Our ostriches aren't native here, so they are known to compete with our native wildlife, like our emus, for plants, for food. They can potentially spread diseases as well throughout the animal world out in our deserts. And the biggest one of all, our ostriches here in South Australia have been known to damage agricultural crops, which is really unfortunate for our farmers and farming as well. If you aren't educated and you're not from Australia or you haven't really learnt about emus and ostriches, seeing them in the wild, they may look extremely similar, but there are a few characteristics that set them apart. Our ostriches are so much larger and so much more powerful than our native emus. Ostriches tend to be black and white. The females do range in colour to a light brown, but our emus are just brown all over. Our ostriches also have 2 toes on each foot, whereas our emus have 3, but I truly hope you aren't ever close enough, especially to an ostrich, where you notice that they have 2 toes, because they have extremely sharp claws as well, and those long, powerful legs that can really give you a nice little kick. And also the speeds as well. If you put an ostrich running next to an emu, the ostrich will outrun the emu by a mile. They are the fastest 2-legged animal. So there's that. But let's talk about our beautiful ostriches that inhabit Africa. So our African ostriches eat plants. They are herbivores, but they have been sometimes documented or known to eat snakes, lizards, or small rodents when, I guess, their food source is scarce. Now, their anatomy is actually quite fascinating. One of the most fascinating I would put alongside maybe wombats. They will swallow stones or rocks, and this is to help assist them in grinding down their food. And fascinatingly enough, our ostriches also have 3 stomachs. But all of these stomachs play a different role. So let's get into that. So let's start with their first stomach, and that is their glandular stomach. Now this first stomach acts as their missing gallbladder. They don't have a gallbladder. So this stomach actually empties itself into another stomach, and that is their muscular stomach. I am trying really hard to make this as easy and simple as possible, but in that muscular stomach is where once they swallow those stones or rocks whole, they will store these stones in their muscular stomach. And this helps, again, in assisting to grind down or break up some of their food sources to make it easier for them to consume and to be able to grab out those nutrients and to also grab out the water necessary for them to be able to use. Living out in the deserts at sometimes throughout the year, water doesn't exist. So they need to be able to get as much water as they need from their food source, from the plants that they eat. And of course, like a lot of other desert dwellers, our ostriches can survive a couple of days without water. And being such a large bird, it has been known that our ostriches can consume up to 10 kilograms of food in just one day. 10 kilograms. Something really fascinating as well, quickly, a little fun fact about our ostriches is if you are into birds and if you find birds fascinating, you either already know this or this is about to be a really cool fun fact. Our ostrich is the only bird in the world to pass urine and solid waste out of separate holes. Little fun fact. Since even in the Australian desert, it really is all about survival. I mean, any sort of ecosystem is. Our wildlife are trying to survive every single day, and especially out in the desert where food is non-existent for, parts of the year, and same with water, you really are just scavenging or hunting whatever you can, especially with our lions and our giraffes, which can travel kilometers a day in search for food. So knowing that everything is trying to survive, our ostriches form extremely large groups for protection to defend themselves against potential threats and predators, especially to protect their young, our little ostriches. So you typically see them in little groups, but at times throughout the year, they have been known to be in groups up to 100, which are called herds. As well as natural predators, our ostriches also face a whole bunch of other threats, including humans. So they are hunted for their feathers, for their meat. They suffer from habitat loss and, of course, warming of the planet as well. They have to try survive and evolve when the deserts are, getting drier, getting hotter. And our ostrich over in Africa actually now only lives in 6 of the once 18 countries that in the past that they inhabited. This is highly due to hunting. This is quite devastating considering that our ostriches play a vital role in the ecosystem. They control pest populations when they do consume small rodents. They also spread seeds from the plants that they consume, which is extremely important for the health of the desert and for plant growth and for food sources for other little or big desert dwellers. And our ostriches also do form symbiotic relationships with other animals in the wild. This just means that both animals benefit from their interaction. So we see this a lot with birds and cows, where, cows are ripping up that grass. You tend to see birds either hanging around them or sitting on their back. And when that grass is being flicked up and all that dirt is being mixed, the birds now have insects and bugs which are flying out. And now they're not flying around the cow's face. So this is a symbiotic relationship. It benefits both parties, both animals. So let's think and talk of some ways that we can help protect our ostriches. Firstly, there is an organization called the African Wildlife Foundation, and they are fantastic. They are working with local communities to introduce safe tourism, which is absolutely necessary for the protection of our wildlife, but also the safety of humans as well when going on safari or when exploring wild habitats. Even here in Australia, it's tourism season right now, and there are, triple the amount of people swimming in the oceans and going exploring on rock pools and going hiking. And there's always a risk of encountering an animal that could be poisonous or venomous or just really not in the mood to encounter a human. So it's important to have knowledge and these safe tourism set into place to help protect humans as well as our wildlife. They also are planning and they manage lands as well to benefit the wildlife. So we have areas specifically for the wildlife to protect them. You as well see this here in Australia, where we have built concrete paths through forests or in parks, but there will be sectioned off areas made of like rope fencing, little rope fencing as well. So kangaroos can still jump over it, wild animals can still get through it, and they have their own little safe haven away from humans, and we are not allowed in there. This is their safety, their place. So this is also what we see happening with the African Wildlife Foundation. So from the ostriches' incredible speeds to their remarkable nature and their very unique behavior as well, they are truly amazing, and they are definitely an animal, and especially a bird, that still amazes me to this day. So of course, if you want to encounter them, you can head over to our African countries. You can try head out to the outback here in South Australia to find some of the wild ostriches that were from the failed farming. But please always be safe, whether you are encountering an ostrich or a snake or even something as small as a beetle. Please always give them their space and be respectful. They are always respectful of you, and they will always give a warning sign. Our snakes, do the S shape up. We have our blue-ringed octopus which displays those beautiful blue rings, and our ostrich does the same. They can be very vocal and they can puff themselves up to try and let you know, hey, please stay away from me. I am not enjoying this interaction. But thank you so much. If you have made it all the way to the end of this episode, I truly am so thankful, and I hope you learned a thing or two about the ostrich and maybe even have some sort of appreciation for them now. They are so powerful and so beautiful, and they are definitely worth encountering in the wild, that is for sure. But thank you so much. Please leave a comment, let me know which animal you would love to hear about next, whether that's on Spotify or here on YouTube, or send me a message. My messages are always open to discuss the podcast if you have a question about an episode or a certain animal. But thank you so much again. Happy New Year as well. I will be seeing you this time next week, of course. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye for now.